Hello, class. Sorry I couldn't be here for today. Make sure you have a handout by the door. It's closed notes today, so that's a fancy word, CLOZE, filling in the blanks. So try to keep up. First thing you want to do is make sure your name's on the handout. Make sure you title it. You can see the title right now on the screen, research. And when you start going into research for these open topic essays, you need to organize your information. So what the following video is going to discuss and give you a strategy for is keeping track of all that information. So the title is Notecards, and we'll also be talking about source cards. But the first thing we want to talk about is these note cards. What goes on a note card? Well, one piece of information that relates to your topic that you didn't already know. And obviously it came from somebody else. So you want to keep track of that information. You want to record it. How do you record that information? Well, some things we've been talking about when you get to the Q of CQT. You can paraphrase, you can summarize, you can quote or directly quote somebody. But it's important to note that you do not plagiarize. Every once in a while I run into your writing and you guys are taking advantage of not really doing what you should be doing, which is putting quote marks around it and citing your source. So make sure that you don't copy, because copying equals plagiarism. Always, always, always give credit where credit is due. So just want to review with you guys, how do you paraphrase? Well, paraphrasing is obviously restating in your own words. It's almost word for word. This is not obviously a strategy for an entire novel. If a novel was 300 pages plus, your paraphrasing of that novel would be 300 pages plus. Painful. So that's not the right idea. Paraphrasing is almost word for word, where you're taking the author's ideas and putting in your own words. Summarizing is where you shrink it down, you compress it, and it's much shorter than the original idea. So going back to that 300-page novel reference, summary could be what you're used to reading on the back of a book, right? A paragraph or two. I'm not going to get too far into this, so let's go to the next slide. But again, always give credit where credit is due. So we just talked about this, where you summarize it in your own words. That's what goes on, that one idea on a note card. I'll give you guys a chance to read this. I'm going to ask the substitute to pause the video. Now that you're finished reading it, you want to move right into an example of paraphrasing here. The font's bigger, so but this obviously is much fewer words than what existed on the previous screen. Kind of a sad reference to a person being deaf and having a tough time getting a job. Just in case you need that. So let's go back to that quote. I wanted to review with you guys. Make sure you use quote marks. Right? It's important to note that your quotes not be more than 4 lines. Then the essay becomes a practice in copying somebody else's work. Not appropriate, right? An essay by definition is expressing your opinion. Along the way you gather evidence to support your opinion. So keep those quotes short. I've always said that since day one. We've talked about this at length, but of course you need the author's last name and page number. And so here's my example. According to Hughes, poetry rocks. Hughes 2. Hey, take a look at this little phrase right here. According to Hughes. That's a tag phrase. You guys, please put a tag phrase before the quote. Please, please, please put a tag phrase before the quote. Again, we're talking about, so what goes on a note card? You can paraphrase, you can summarize, you can directly quote one idea onto a note card. It's nice to keep track of your information because you guys are going to be all over the place looking for new information on a topic you chose. It's not a textbook given to you. How do you stay on task with these note cards as you enter the World Wide Web, which is where most of you are going to go? Very important to ask yourself a couple of questions. First and foremost, you want to make sure you're staying on topic. You want to make sure that whatever you're looking at, whatever your source is, whatever the website is that it's actually relevant to you. If you're researching the disorder of bulimia and you end up on a website talking about how to lose weight, you've lost your focus. So first question, does it pertain to your topic? Does it relate to your topic? Second question, does it actually help you? Now you're in the right ballpark. Does it actually help you with your topic dealing with a disorder of bulimia in college students? Is it specific to that? Something else that's important, you guys are doing this project for school, so is it appropriate? We'll go more into depth with this, but you guys have already been exposed to the idea that you avoid HTML websites. You can find that at the end of the web address, the URL. And Mr. Kraus has taught you several times about this, that .org, .gov, and .edu are fantastic. And so I'll put a happy face where my happy face is. Good. So let's keep going. Let's go back to this idea of how many pieces of information go on a note card. Just one. Make sure you only include one thought per card. Make sure you only include one thought per card. Make sure you only... Sorry, let me fix the digital editing tools there. Got stuck on repeat of making sure you only put one thought on a card. Again, as you enter the World Wide Web, some of you expressed to Mr. Kraus one of the reasons you struggle is you get lost in it and you get sidetracked. It is a great idea to constantly go back to your controlling idea. My example of the disorder of bulimia in college students is it's something I want to refer back to often as I Google search, as I Bing search, Big Mama search, Yahoo search, or whatever suits your fancy search. And if you run into something, close it, start over, go back to the search engine and reinvest in a new, it's called a query, what you put in to find information. If it does not pertain to your thesis, ditch it, throw it out, move on. So what goes on this note card? The one note, and there's a little bit more to it to keep you organized. So here's my example. Once upon a time in college, I did a research report on Langston Hughes, my favorite poet. And so here's an example. There's 4 bits of information on this note card. Number 1 is a topic. I'll talk to you a little more about that. Number 2 is a number, a source number. Number 3 is that direct information, that one idea. And number 4 is, think of it as your parenthetical citation. So in this case, this is I'm directly quoting a book where Hughes said something on page 15. Again, in the middle is one note, and let's talk a little bit more in depth about this topic that's in the upper left-hand corner, that way. The topic is what kind of information is on the card. Sometimes, excuse me, you might have an idea about where it'll go in the essay, so put introduction, put conclusion, put body paragraph 3. But more importantly, you begin to realize that maybe this is background information. Maybe this is really important information about his poetry. And so this was the list that Mr. Kraus came up with as he was working on a research paper on Langston Hughes, and I broke it up into these categories, and I kept trying to find information, direct quotes on Langston Hughes, both his upbringing and so on, and just a window into what college looked like. I pretty much put 2 paragraphs for each topic on the screen there. And again, get you thinking about what are some topics that might be related, subtopics that might be related to your overall essay. If mine is the disorder of bulimia in college students, maybe I look at peer pressure towards bulimia. Maybe I look at the Barbie doll impact on students. And those would be some subcategories I might end up creating. So there is this reference here to a source. A source number refers to a separate index card. Okay, it refers to a separate index card. When you go into the World Wide Web, you do a Google search, you bounce into a really good website, stop and make a bibliography right here, right now, before you start doing any of those note cards with one bit of information on them. So let's take a look at this. All right, so now you're on the back of your closed notes. We're talking about, this is a source card. It's a different color for demonstration purposes. Some students actually like to follow this pattern. What goes on a source card, like I said earlier, is that bibliography. You want to include where you found it. Most of you guys are going to be on the web. A Google search is last on my list. Wikipedia is last after a Google search on my list. So what are some better sources? EBSCOhost and Eric, Google Scholar. Those are better places to create or to go into the research field on the World Wide Web. The last thing I haven't talked about yet is that number in the upper corner. So in this actual process on the PowerPoint or in the presentation that's being shown to you, this was the third source I found. Imagine that, a book, a physical book in a library. I found this book and I started to find some good information, so I stopped and created a source card. This was the third. Let me get my fingers in front of the screen here. This is my third source for modeling presentation purposes, and I created a bibliography, a source card for it. And so again, I do a bibliography one time, and I might get several notes, several note cards from this one book. So that's the information about the source title or source number. I don't really want to cover this in too much detail. You know about the parenthetical citation, author's last name, page number. So here's a list or a quick little super old school image of how I might have a bunch of sources. So on the screen you'll see here's a reference to source number 2, here's a reference to source number 1, a reference to source 5, and on those in those references, right, I've got several note cards. That might not make sense. Let me rephrase that. You're looking at note cards. On each one is one idea from a source. How do I know what source I found them if it's a week later? I look right in the upper right-hand corner at source number 2, and I would have a card labeled number 2 with a bibliography on it, and so on and so forth. I would have a fifth source card labeled number 5 in the upper right-hand corner, and it would have a bibliography on it in case I use this information right here in my essay. I just wanted to model to you guys what a works cited looks like. So there you go. But let's review. Let's take a look at this. Let's say I found 3 cards from source number 3, and here they are, right? In the upper left-hand corner, I found one note, so I wrote down a card. As I kept reading and scanning the book, I found another really good note. So I wrote that one note on a second card. I'm only writing down one note per card, and they each have a reference. Where's my cursor? There it is. They each have a reference to the third source card, number 3 source, which is this yellow index card here, where my bibliography is. In case I use any of this information in my essay, I'll be able to do a bibliography on my works cited page for it. So there's kind of 2 strategies built into this. To keep your ideas organized, to keep your research organized, you want to take notes, one note on a note card. And as you find these good sources, you want to keep track of them by creating a source card. On it is a bibliography, and just number them in the order you find it. Hopefully that makes a little bit of sense, and your substitute will carry you forward into the next part of the class.